Welcome to this free Digital Book World webcast, sponsored by InnoData. I'm Jeremy Greenfield, Editorial Director of Digital Book World, and I'll be your host and moderator. Before we get started, I have a few short announcements to take care of. Please note that all attendees to the webcast will have their audio lines muted to limit background noises. There is a box on the right-hand side of your screen marked Questions. If you have any questions during the webcast, please type them in the box and we will get them at the end of the presentation. If you have any technical difficulties, please type them in the box and our wonderful webcast programmer, Aaron Semple, will attend to them. This webcast is scheduled to last an hour. After presentations from each of our panelists, we will have a brief discussion and answer the questions that have come in through the question box. In the following days, you will receive an email with a link to a recording of this webcast from GoToWebinar. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor. InnoData is a leading provider of business process, technology, and consulting services, as well as products and solutions that help clients create, manage, use, and distribute digital information. Propelled by a culture that emphasizes quality, service, and innovation, InnoData has developed a client base that includes many of the world's preeminent media, publishing, and information service companies, as well as leading enterprises in information-intensive industries such as aerospace, defense, financial services, government healthcare, high technology, insurance, intelligence, manufacturing, and law. And now to the webcast. I'm first going to introduce each of our panelists, and then we will begin. We will be hearing from three distinguished panelists today. The first is Iris Blassie. Iris is the digital media manager at literary PR firm Hilsinger Mendelssohn East. Formerly, she was an associate editor at Union Square Press, and she's also worked for Random House, NBC, and the Ideological Company. She has written for outlets including the Wall Street Journal, New York Magazine, and Publishers Weekly, just to name a few. Iris will be speaking to us about using author content for marketing purposes. Second, we will be hearing from Laura Hazard-Owen. She is the book publishing reporter at Paid Content. She was previously the editor of Publishing Trends, a website and newsletter for the book publishing industry. Laura will be speaking to us about new forms of short content that are gaining traction. And last, we will be hearing from Stephen Ryden-Lloyd. Stephen is the Senior Vice President of InnoData Consulting. Stephen joined InnoData in 2009 and is a member of the executive management team. He brings the experience of a 20-year career in the information and media industry and heads InnoData's consulting practice. He will be speaking about InnoData's defined approach to content strategy. But first up is Iris Blassie. Iris, take it away.
Hi, thanks, Jeremy. We've really passed the tipping point where we need to be defending social media. We've all seen that when used the right way, social media is and can be a critical component of a book marketing campaign. And we all have accepted the fact that it's a lot more than strangers announcing what they had for lunch that day. Just quickly, a few brief statistics. Facebook has over 800 million active users. Twitter has over 300 million users, 50 million of which log in every single day. Pinterest is growing at the same rate Facebook was 5 years ago, which is pretty quickly. More video has been uploaded to YouTube every month than has been broadcast by the major 3 TV networks in the last 60 years. And there are 50 billion page views a month on Tumblr. That's a lot of traffic and it's a lot of information. So I think we all know now that we need to be there, but I still hear from authors and publishers the frustration about what to do when they're there. Social media is a machine that gobbles up content, so you really have to be prepared to feed the beast, and it can be a big burden for somebody without an extraordinarily large social media budget. The good news is that for publishers and authors and almost everybody in the industry, the work is already largely done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Presumably you have some kind of book product that can help you, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about how to take that existing content and reuse and remix it for social media marketing. Can you see my screen? The first key distinction that I'd like to make is that there's a difference between social networking and social media marketing. I think in a job like ours where passion and profession overlap to such a high degree, the line can get fuzzy. But social media marketing is not just showing up to talk about books you like or what you're working on or this great review that just came in. So social media and social networking is a conversation, and it can be sprawling, a multi-pronged conversation. And yes, you can be engaging with journalists and talking to media outlets who may be in a position to cover you just as much as you're talking to readers, but social media marketing is a concerted effort to spread brand awareness, to grow a fan base, and in our case, to ultimately sell books. Marketing should be embedded in but not override social media engagement, and that's why you just can't have people replying to you all day long. You need to grow your brand by having those arrows go out. What are you saying that people will want to share and pass along? The digital space performs exactly what publishers have known for years and years, but it's all about word of mouth. Hold on, I'm having some technical difficulties here. So the first step before commencing any social media marketing initiative is that it's important to set your objectives. The first step of this is to analyze your current digital footprint and to figure out where you want to deepen it. So the first question here is to think about what you have. What is the existing intellectual property that you're working with? Do you have your current manuscript, presumably? Do you have a whole backlist of titles? Do you have illustrated books? Do you have a chapter that ended up on the cutting room floor? Are there previous author interviews that were done that you can mine for quotes and comments and thoughts? What you have is going to determine your content strategy. Then the next question to ask is, what do you want? And more followers is not really the right answer. You have to figure out what your objective is for each of your content points that you're putting out there in the world. Are you selling your book? Do you want to raise awareness of your brand? Hopefully these goals are all mutually achievable, but it's important to think about your end game when conceiving of overall strategy, and even when planning individual posts. Thinking about whether you want somebody to click a link, to follow you back, to retweet you, to repost you, to answer a question, to sign up for a mailing list. These are all individual goals that will shape the way that you're going about your content. Then the next question to ask yourself is, how are you going to get there? And the answer is social media. There are lots of social media options that are out there right now, and I encourage everybody to not try to be everywhere at once. If you do try, you will likely spread yourself too thin. There are lots of different options, and there are many ways to achieve interplay between those outlets, but trying to be everywhere at once will mean that you are nowhere significantly. So I think that it's critical to think about what you have and what you want out of it, and then plan your tactics from there. I do think that it's important for everybody to have a website as a component of their digital footprint. A blog can be a component of that. A personal Facebook profile, a Facebook fan page. Twitter, I think, can be an engine that drives a lot. LinkedIn, obviously we see all of these. But I think that, choose one or choose two, start building those, start growing those, and think about what you have that might work in these different kinds of outlets. If you have something that's particularly visual, probably Pinterest or Tumblr is a good place for you to be. If you have a lot of text that's available to you, probably a medium like Twitter would be more appropriate. I think that there are lots of different things for authors and publishers to be trying in this realm, but I think that, again, it's critical to focus as you're going. So the question is really, what works online? This is different, for everybody, and kind of what gets their attention. But really, it's things that surprise, things that delight, things that provide humor, things that provoke a strong negative or positive reaction. And what kinds of forms do these things take? They take the form of clever quotes or surprising statistics, brilliant standalone lines, a provocative photo. These things are all in your intellectual property that's already existing. And so what I'll do for a lot of my clients is just, go through their current book and pick out all of these things. I kind of conceive of it as a form of literary archaeology, to go through the text and dig out those bones, kind of dusting them out piece by piece. A lot of people, obviously, there's the concern about cannibalizing book sales, but I think that when used in the right way, you don't want to take a huge excerpt and just dump it online. You want to take these little bits and pieces and thinking about interesting ways to remix them and reuse them, and kind of what are ways that you can use a message that is overarching from, a backlist and pull tips or the, thought process or a top 10 list from a book. These are the kinds of ways that you can remix the content in interesting ways that will make people feel like the information is fresh. So again, what do you use with these kinds of content? Where do you put them? On Twitter, little sound bites and quotes, stats and studies work. I think that, another bit of intellectual property that's existing is using names that are in the index of a book. If there are current people who are addressed in the book or named in the book, go and pull them out and look to see if they have a presence in the social media sphere. There are Facebook and Twitter have handles for a reason, and I always encourage people to go and grab onto them. This is a way to generate a conversation with somebody. And if your book really praises somebody or is critical of somebody, now is an opportunity to take that into the social media realm and have that be a discussion starting point. I think on Facebook, it's a place for longer content, for discussion questions, to really have something happening. Tumblr and Pinterest, I think that, we're seeing different uses of it, but images and quotes are obviously strongest there. And then I think, too, a lot of people are trying to build social media platforms in short periods of time. And I say go ahead and use some of the higher traffic websites and blogs that are already out there and that are already existing. We've had pieces that were pulled from the Huffington Post books vertical onto the homepage of AOL, and book sales just shot up immediately. So I think that you can't drag everybody over to your side. So go and use those places that have a much higher, many more eyeballs than you have right now. And I think too, in terms of remixing things, to think about different ways to create branded ideas. The other thing, I sometimes do a branded hashtag. We had an author who was a businessman who had gone to West Point and had learned a lot of the critical lessons of his life from his time there. So we did a branded hashtag campaign, Biz Lessons from West Point. It was short, it was concise, it was clear to the point, it communicated exactly what it was, and it got the attention of the audience that was interested in that. So I think to think about different ways of putting your content in different spaces that will really get those eyeballs going. It's essential not to forget the social component of social media. The content serves as your social media backbone, so that you have a steady stream of content you can rely upon, but the purpose is to have that as that backbone and then chime in spontaneously. So I would say the first rule is show up. Be there. I encourage everybody to post natively and to think about the different kinds of ways that information shows up in these different kinds of platforms and what compels people to pass things along. I think that it's a different kind of compulsion on Twitter than it is on Tumblr, than it is on Facebook. So, be there in those different spaces and really feeling it out. The second thing is to search. Search for people who already might be posting about you or your brand or your book. Even include searches with the name misspelled, because if people are taking the trouble to write something about you online, they want to be in touch with you and just let them know that you're there. The other thing that you can do with your existing content is, if you have a nonfiction book that has answers in it, find a problem that you can solve. I think Gary Vaynerchuk talked about this, that when he first started on Twitter, he would look for people who would be asking questions about Chardonnay. So, I always have as a search, how do you X? Find out what that X is and then answer that question for people. Talk. It's important not to forget to talk, to comment, to answer. We understand that you cannot spend all day replying to people, but I think that it's important to make a good faith gesture to show that you are there with people who are choosing to engage in this content. It's critical to be talking back to them. Be spontaneous. I've said it before that I think spontaneity is the special sauce of social media. So if you have scheduled out all your posts ahead of time and you have this really rigid content strategy, I think that people can tell that, you're not really showing up and really being there. So, participate, have fun when there's a kind of strange hashtag game that pops up. Take part in that. Address trending topics that are happening in the moment. Having a strategy is critical when you're showing up in the social media sphere, but I think that deviating from that is as important. And then validation. I think that this is one of the easiest ways to engage in the social media space. Twitter gives you a favorite button. You know, Facebook and Tumblr and Pinterest give you a like button. To validate somebody is a very important thing. If you can't spend all day replying to people, but you can say, you know, I read your comment and I thought about it and I appreciate that you did that. I think that that serves a lot in terms of generating stickiness of engagement. So social media obviously is not an end goal in and of itself. It's a means to an end. It's about capturing attention and redirecting it. So with all of these content strategies, as you're thinking about the intellectual property that you already have and the ways that you can remix and reuse it, pause and think for a moment about what works on you. There's so much information streaming by at a mile a minute. So what catches your attention? It's probably, you know, not somebody screaming out for followers or begging for reblogs. It's probably not somebody only posting quotes from their own book over and over. Think about what it is exactly that earns your own click-through and what makes you want to retweet. If you can pinpoint just how others successfully seduce you, then you can use those lessons for yourself. At its core, social media really is about the art of the tease, and I actually wrote a piece for Digital Book World in the fall about this. But it is about, you know, clever headlines and good timing, and, you know, I really think that if you can use some of your existing content to take off a single glove in just the right way, you're going to find a lot more people sticking around for the rest of the show. So that's my presentation, and thanks.
Thanks very much, Iris. That was very interesting. Now we're going to kick it over to Laura Hazard-Owen, who's going to talk about new forms of short content that are gaining traction. Laura, take it away.
Thanks, guys. Hold on one sec while I just pull this up. Oops, sorry. Just one more second. Okay, there we go. Can everybody see this okay? All right. So I'm going to be talking about e-singles today. E-singles are a form of digital content that you've probably been hearing about more recently, especially if you follow any of the stuff that I write, because I think that they're a very exciting way for publishers to sort of repackage digital content in a new format and also find a home for content that they might not have been able to publish alone in the past. So what are e-singles? Basically, e-singles are sort of snack-sized ebooks. You'll sometimes hear them referred to as digital shorts or just as ebooks, but they are longer than the typical magazine article. They're definitely longer than a blog post, and they're shorter than a full-length book. So they can be anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000 words, and they are generally sold at low prices, under $5, usually under $3. So this picture shows a guy curling up on a sofa with his iPad. You know, and I'm sure we've all done something like this, if not with our iPad, then with our e-reader. The point is that people like doing this with their gadgets. And a lot of companies right now are targeting people who are, you know, coming home from work. They're tired of reading little short blog posts all day long. They want something a little longer, a little meatier. And instead of reading it at their desk, they're going to read it when they get home, load it on their device, you know, read it at home or on their commute to and from work. And a lot of companies have emerged online that are sort of aiming to tap this impulse right now. One of these is long form. Here's another one, read it later, where people save things that they want, save things they find online that they want to spend a little more time with later in the day. So they go online, they find something substantial to read, and they save it, and they come back to it. So what does this have to do with e-singles? I mean, to me, it's a sign that readers like this middle ground between a short blog post and a long full-length book. And they're, you know, these works in digital format are really ideal for the curling up thing where you come home from work, you know, take a little bit of time to read something that you didn't have time to get to during the day. It's a time when people want to read something that is a little more substantial. They're not just standing there tapping around on their phone. It's also not a gigantic time commitment. So we have the working definition of what they are. Who is releasing them? It's a very wide range of companies. Traditional book publishers, there's Simon & Schuster's My Lady One by Stephen King on the left there. He released that standalone short story as a way to promote an upcoming book, 11/22/63. But the content of the books wasn't actually the same. This is just, a little sort of appetizer. It's a standalone short story to get readers kind of excited about what's coming up next. And that e-single included an excerpt from the upcoming book in the back, so it's another way to draw readers in. Then on the right there's a Runner's World Essential Guide from Rodale, which pulled together a bunch of different content from Runner's World magazine and packaged it into an e-single. And both of those are $2.99. Lots of magazines and newspapers are doing this as well, taking content that they previously ran and stringing it together or enhancing it, beefing it up in some way, and selling it. Here's A Nightmare Made Real from the Los Angeles Times. That was the first e-single that they did, expanded on a story that had been published earlier in the year, and added new information, more interviews from the journalists who had originally done the stories, and also provided a little bit of info on how the reporting was done. Startups are also focusing on e-singles. Here's Byliner. Byliner was launched in May 2011. It has two components, an archive of journalism online, and then Byliner originals by authors like John Krakauer and Ann Patchett. The Atavist, another startup from former Wired editors at Wired magazine. They focus on narrative nonfiction. Here's another company, Now and Then, newer startup, launched this past December, and they focus on serious nonfiction. And then we have Amazon. You have probably heard of Amazon's Kindle Singles. Those launched in January 2011. And Amazon, sort of not the creator of this format, but the first, the first sort of big company to focus on it in any way. The description of Kindle Singles is, quote, compelling ideas expressed at their natural length. They're signing original authors. They are also selling e-singles from Byliner, Now and Then, and The Atavist. There's 170 Kindle Singles right now, and they're selling about, adding about 3 new ones every week. I'll talk a little bit more about them in a sec. So what can they be about? I think you've seen from the previous slides, they can be about anything, mostly falling into these categories for now: fiction, nonfiction, long-form journalism, or more personal stuff like memoir, personal essays. And then a little bit of what we're seeing is sort of more useful, practical, how-to nonfiction like cooking. Where does the content come from? Again, we saw that generally if you're talking about a book publisher or a startup like Byliner or Kindle, or talking about Kindle Singles, those companies are focused on original content. Right now, if we're talking about a newspaper or magazine releasing these, it's more likely to be something that was previously published, and then they're maybe pulling it together and enhancing it in some way. Where are they sold? Sometimes they're sold in separate sections of an ebook store. I'll get to a little more about that in a sec. They're floating around maybe in the general ebook store, floating around in the Nook store. That's not such a great idea. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. They may be marketed on a source's website, whether it's the publisher or Byliner or whatever, and then include links to the ebook store. And then we're also starting to see a few of these being sold through separate apps. So let's talk about Kindle Singles. This is the largest platform for e-singles so far. Launched a little over a year ago, 170 titles now, with 3 new ones added per week. And as I reported last week, over 2 million Kindle Singles have been sold. You have to submit work for inclusion in this program, so you can't just go online and say, okay, I'm going to upload this and it'll be in Kindle Singles. Everything submitted is vetted by an editor, and if it's accepted, it's included in the Kindle Singles section of the store. That's really important because the work there gets a lot of extra promotion by Amazon. These will be featured in email newsletters, sometimes as Kindle Daily Deals, and the Kindle Singles section itself is featured prominently on Amazon's website. Here's Apple's Quick Reads, kind of Apple's answer to Kindle Singles. They're not signing up any original authors the way Amazon is, but they have built this separate section of iTunes for works under $5 that, as you see, you can read quickly. And I'm hearing from a lot of publishers that they are seeing an increasing number of their sales from e-singles coming from Apple. And here's Barnes & Noble's Nook Snaps. It's not as developed as Kindle Singles, as you can see. Doesn't look as good. The section's a little hard to find on Barnes & Noble's website, but it is there, and it's just a sign that you know, various ebook stores are realizing the growing importance of this format. Finally, apps. Here's the Atavist app. The Atavist is one of those startups that I told you about. They are selling e-singles through their app, and they'll also be launching a subscription in a couple months, I believe. So what do these cost? Just broken down by price. You'll see these are the Kindle Singles prices. Most of them are $1.99, about a quarter at 99 cents, and the rest at $2.99. So, you know, going up to $2.99 is really a little more on the expensive side for these. Talking briefly about business models. What are the business models? Standalone business. An additional revenue stream within a larger company. That's most newspaper and magazine models. That's what book publishers are doing now. That's really the model with Kindle Singles as well. So it's using these as a revenue stream within a larger company, and you know, maybe kind of an experimental revenue stream for now. Finally, partnerships. Lots of book publishers, in addition to maybe signing up some e-singles on their own, are working with media partners to help them do marketing, provide content, and sort of cross-promote these to both audiences. Here's some of the companies that are doing that. So what are the advantages of getting into e-singles? You know, and I think that there are a lot of advantages to this. One of the biggest advantages is that this can maintain reader interest between book releases, and that's kind of going to depend on the genre that you're publishing in. But for the example of fiction, you know, it's a great way to get readers excited about an author in between full-length books that are published. So, for example, Lee Child's Second Son, that was a Kindle single, and it was also sold at other ebook stores. That served as a standalone prequel to Lee Child's Reacher novels, and it also included an excerpt of the upcoming book. So this is something kind of funny. I do think it's important to make it clear that these are not full-length books so that readers know what they're getting. But readers are also not necessarily saying, oh, you know, this is short. I want to read something short. You know, readers, I think, get the idea that that Amazon sends out there, which is compelling ideas expressed at their natural length. These can be topic-based for readers. They can be author-based. They're looking for a story to be told in a way that makes sense, and there's a quote from Penguin. Another advantage of these is that it allows publishers to do an upsell, to expose readers to perhaps a more expensive product, and that's a key part of Hearst's strategy surrounding its e-singles, like the Good Housekeeping mini cookbooks you see here. This is not that expensive to do. You know, if you already have this content in digital format, that does not cost a lot more to compile it into a separate ebook. And you know, maybe you were giving that content away before. You might have released a short story for free before to sort of up reader excitement before a novel, and now you can sell it for 99 cents. So it can be a new revenue stream for you. For journalists, an advantage of this is just that they may have had this work that they've done and they couldn't sell it anywhere before because word count was just not working out for either a magazine article or a full-length book. But on an e-reader, it doesn't really matter how long it is, and readers don't necessarily care. So here's another way for authors to sell content. So what are the risks? True, it is not expensive to publish these. It can be kind of tempting to just throw a bunch of stuff up against the wall and see what sticks. But as you see the John Meacham quote here, it is a fairly low-risk way to experiment, but it's not a dump for stuff that you can't sell otherwise. Still a genuine gap in the market. Discovery of these, especially outside the Kindle single store, is still challenging. Know that Byliner and the Atavist have to work hard on their marketing. And even people who do want to read this stuff may still need some help with the e-reader or something like that. David Woolman is an author who did an e-single for the Atavist. And these are low cost, so you do have to sell a lot of them to make a significant amount of money. This is not necessarily a way to get rich. It's a way to monetize content that you just could not sell before. And I think that's kind of the takeaway from this. And just remember the consumer in all this. If you're selling something and it's kind of floating around in an ebook store, well, keep in mind that there's also lots of full-length ebooks that are available for 99 cents. So price alone does not sort of convey to a possible buyer that these are shorter. And you'll sometimes see Amazon customer reviews saying things like, this book was really short. What a ripoff. So you want to, make a note on the cover or something that says what these are, and you don't want customers to go and rank these e-singles as 1 star because they think they were too short or too expensive or something like that. Picking a topic that's relevant, even though that these can be published fairly quickly. Keep in mind that you want to sell something that readers want to buy, especially if they were used to getting the content for free from you before. And that's it for me. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Laura. That was very interesting, and I think we all really appreciated your reporting on the topic at paidcontent.org last week. Now I'd like to kick it over to Stephen Ryden-Lloyd, who's going to talk about Innodata's defined approach to content strategy. Stephen?
Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening. I trust that my screen can be seen, so it looks like it can. So we're going to move on a little bit. I'm going to talk in the theme some more about the sort of operationalization and somewhat maybe some more mature approaches to using social media technology, and also thinking about some of the key technological considerations. So we're going to take a look at what I call implementing a social media strategy using public or private approaches. We'll get into that, but what that means is, for example, engaging through the vast array of social media tools that have been talked about already, or actually thinking about how you embed social media-like behavior and tools inside digital products, which I think is a trend that we're seeing quite a lot. I'm going to touch on analytics. Analytics is being talked about an awful lot at the moment. There's a huge amount of data that comes with social media, many people, many touch points between people and content, and that has its challenges. And also take a touch about whether existing content distribution technology is going to support the business models and the content distribution that people have. So, short overview of some of these key challenges. And I'll start with what I've introduced as public or in-product. There are lots of pictures of all of the different social media tools that there are. But increasingly what we're seeing as a business, and what we help our customers do, is develop digital products where social media-like tools are embedded inside of them. And it has a number of advantages. They're specific to you. They're specific to you. You can tailor them for your customer. You can give them tools within digital products that are relevant to their jobs if they're professional products. It also means that you can collect and analyze data around how people use things. And I'll show a couple of examples of this. You can provide some advanced tools, especially if you're in the world of professional publishing, more so than perhaps trade or fiction or educational publishing. Thinking about advanced tools that help people tag and note, highlight, or link and share information you can learn and you can monetize from that. You can take away lessons about what is working because you have access to the data. Let me just show a couple of examples of things that are out there at the moment. The first picture that I've got up here is a shot of an interface on the Inkling platform. There's been a lot of publicity about Inkling recently, a recently launched tablet and as well as online product that is creating or taking existing books and creating highly interactive, immersive digital experiences from those books. And it's an example of a company that's embedding social media-like tools within the digital product itself. This screenshot just shows a notebook functionality. Within the Inkling platform, notes can be created by anybody who has access to a product, and they can share notes. So if you're in an educational environment, you can share comments and ideas or thoughts about the material that you're interested in with your peers. Second example that I've got is a much more professional online product. This is another product that was launched relatively recently. But there's some, again, the idea of embedding social media-like capabilities inside the digital product is prevalent. This particular product has the ability to add notes and highlights and links. And one of the things that it gives the publisher the information is how people are tagging content that is of interest to them. So we have, in the world of professional publishing, it's very important to have discoverability as a key asset in digital products. How do I pinpoint the accurate detail that I need to perform my job as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible? And in this case, the publisher has the ability to learn how their customers are doing that so that they can then inform the navigation and the search and also the topic map that goes with this product. I wanted to touch a little bit about analytics. I don't think there are that many great answers to what we need to do with analytics and data that we gather through social media interactions at the moment. But one thing that is there is that at the very large scale, at the Facebook, at the Google, at those large enterprise scales, there's a huge amount of data that is available that tracks how people are sharing, collaborating, commenting upon, using digital content. But typically, when we think about analytics, we manage what we can measure, and therefore we analyze what we know to analyze. So if we know what the question is that we're asking, we go out and gather the data, and we get the answers that we think we want. But increasingly, what we see and what we hear is that people want to do something different, like trends. They want to spot a trend before something is happening in the market. We want to find out whether a book that's been published is, what is the chatter about it? How are people commenting on it? Is it something that we can use to predict a level of sale or a level of success that follows? And increasingly what we're doing is using different tool sets, different analytical processes and tool sets to try and spot those things. And, I've mentioned some of those in the sub-bullet points here, but we see people using sentiment analysis tools, or they're doing knowledge mining inside very large data sets, aggregating conversations by taking social media connectors and pulling data from available sources. And that demands a different approach to the way that we think about technology within publishing businesses and how we manage that data. That's something that's very new. And I think it's very nascent. I don't think there are a huge lot of very successful stories there yet, but it's something that is very much happening. And it sounds like the big data thing. Big data is gaining a lot of noise at the moment, and it's particularly one of those things that's driven by the volume of data and analytics that's available around social media connectivity. So I think the bottom bullet that I've mentioned there, and we see this in some environments, is that those who understand what's happening better than their peers will drive competitive advantage from that. And I think this is one area that we would all keep an eye on. The third area I wanted to I'm sorry, just before I did that, I wanted just to, in the theme of analytics, wanted to show another view. This is something outside the publishing trenches, but I hope it might provide an insight into lessons to how some other people are using social media technology to drive competitive advantage. Autodesk, many people may know it, is a software manufacturing company based in California. Their primary product is AutoCAD, modeling software. There's a very good, by the way, there's a very good interview with the leader of the Autodesk project on a website or a blog called The Content Wrangler, which anybody can read. But one of the things that Autodesk did over a period of time through extensive questionnaires and analysis of its customers' behavior is that they realized their customers were spending less time consuming the product support content that they were publishing. Very high cost activity. They produce their online help, their in-product help, the guidebooks that go with their products. And they were finding that people were going to other sites. They were going to YouTube, or they were going to LinkedIn communities where they would find local users or professionals using the software, and they were helping each other. They were spending less time consuming this high-value content that Autodesk itself was producing. And one of the strategies that they came up with was to implement a wiki, and a wiki that combines their own content with user-generated content. And the theme of analytics, and one of the outcomes of implementing this strategy has been a very successful strategy for them. They've had millions of contributions from their users around the world. They have hundreds of thousands of visitors. And what they do is they track an awful lot of data about what people are doing, what they're commenting on, which content they're accessing. And that data is telling them some really important things. It's telling them what is the most highly valued content that they're producing. And they take that data and they take it back into their content creation process, and they're now using that as a way of refocusing their efforts on what is the most high-value content. And that, in turn, over a period of time, is forecast to lead to a higher value customer engagement. Customers will then respond better, spend more time in the Autodesk environment through this wiki and other things that they're doing. And the whole strategy will, as I say, is forecast to be very successful because of that. But that's one lesson that we might learn. Lastly, I need to touch a little bit on content distribution technology, because the world is very fast changing at the moment. I think that's something that we all witness to. In the old way of publishing, and I probably count myself as one of those people. I can recall my first job interview in publishing, where I was asked if I knew what a galley was. And the world has changed so much since then. But in the old world of publishing, it's very much a batch and publish process. Long lead times for product development, not uncommon for 12 or 18-month cycles for some published products, if not more. We were producing whole products. The idea of splitting a book up into very small chunks and distributing those was really not around 10 or more like 20 years ago. We had a limited distribution channel process. We knew that we were sending out to the wholesale, to the trade, to the bookshop market, to educational stores, whatever. We had very little customer data because the customer interaction was very much a third-party activity, and actually quite rigid business models and revenue models that went with that. And what we have now is a world where, and I think when we talk about things like e-singles that iterate themselves from short books into perhaps a different form of the content, or even different content itself in longer form books, an example of how we're getting rapid iterations of products. It's becoming a much more agile process. For example, there are examples out there of people who are building stories in response to reader feedback. We're seeing a world where it's important to think about how to manage chunks of content at a very granular level. And what's actually also important there is how to profile that content, how to think about the content structure so that it is applicable to all of the things that we're doing nowadays. There are so many more distribution channels, whether tablet platforms, online, or other things. And activity is current, it's real. Things are changing on a daily, hourly, by-the-minute basis, and that leads to an awful lot of data. We're also seeing the emergence of different business models. I'm sure we've all read about, for example, the idea of serial books, an idea that goes back to the 19th century. But serial books that support advertising, either as printed products or as digital products on tablets. And that's something that's different revenue model for many publishers. When we think about that, e-singles a different revenue model. We also see examples of dynamic pricing, the idea where a book in its early form, or a product in its early form, is released at a price that entices people to become a part of it, and that product develops over time. And the price changes over time. And that's something that's very different as well. But I technology, as I said at the bottom, is largely optimized for this old process of publishing. And so it does take somewhat of a new approach. There are things that we need to think about in terms of our content technology that support rapid release management, support maybe serial publishing, but increasingly think about how we package up and distribute smaller chunks of content into different channels and different digital distribution channels. I touched upon the whole data management issue, and there's a need which we don't have in a lot of publishing businesses to analyze data much more than we used to use business intelligence tools to perform data analytics or some of the other tools that I mentioned a moment ago. And communication is much more real-time. Content update cycles are becoming almost real-time in some digital products. And that, of course, leads us to thinking about different processes and different ways of operating, different ways of delivering excellence in operational processes in businesses. And one of those may be to think about how we implement XML workflows more widely in publishing businesses. And that brings me to the close of those three short topics, thinking about analytics, content technology, and how social media can be embedded within digital products. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephen. Very interesting. So now we're going to go to questions, and I'm going to ask a mix of questions that we have here at Digital Book World, as well as questions that have been submitted through the question box. And thank you, everyone, for your contributions. First off, since Stephen, you recently finished your presentation, I'd love to ask you about analytics. I think it's something that confuses a lot of people in the publishing world. I'd love to hear just for a few minutes about how a small or medium-sized publisher can harness analytics and data to inform their overall content strategy. And I was hoping you could give an example of a publisher that is already doing it well.
I don't actually. Let me answer the second part first. I can't reference a publisher that is doing it well, unfortunately. But as I said, I think it's a nascent stage of this whole process is the use of analytics. And the story that I had that I was able to share pointed to what Autodesk was doing, and of course they're not in the publishing industry. They're a large content producer in and of themselves, but they're not in the publishing industry. But if I maybe just refer back to that, the technology that they deployed was an open source wiki technology called MindTouch. It comes with a lot of data gathering and analytical tools embedded inside that particular application. So it's a relatively low effort and easy way into gathering data and then being able to look at it and see what is important. And what they do is, for example, is in that environment, they ask their customers to rate contributions. So they get very real-time updates on what is perceived to be the most highly valued contribution. And so that's kind of an example of an easy way, perhaps, to get into that. We're not talking about large-scale technology cost or large-scale processes. Another way that we sometimes help our businesses is to gather and scrape data for them and to perform that analysis ourselves. So again, it's not something that is enormously consuming of time and cost in the publishing businesses in and of itself. So a couple of examples, but I hope that's useful, Jeremy.
Yes, thank you. The next question is for Laura. So you mentioned that e-singles are not a way to get rich. But do you think that it's a viable revenue stream for publishers going forward? And, is it worth the amount of effort for publishers? Is it worth the energy? Should they be going after it?
Jeremy, can you? Okay, sorry, I was muted for a sec. So do I think that this is a viable strategy for publishers? Yeah, definitely. I think that this, as I said in the presentation, I don't think that this is that much extra work for publishers, for one thing. If they are already in relationships with e-tailers, if they already have a way that they're distributing content to these platforms, this is a pretty simple thing to do. And as to the question of where they should be finding this content, I think that they should sort of look to the authors that they're already working with, talk to the authors that they're already working with. I think a lot of authors see this as a great opportunity to sort of, find a way to monetize some content that they've written that they haven't been able to sell before. So, ask an author if they have a short story that they might want to sell separately to promote a title coming up. Or, if you have a nonfiction author who writes about something really topical, sort of interesting, see if they might like to update, a piece from a chapter from their most recent book, just sort of riff on that with some new information, something like that. And I should point out here that I don't think e-singles are solely a marketing and promotion tool, so I don't think that necessarily that what publishers should be doing is, say, pulling a chapter or a short story out of an existing title and selling it separately, although that is perhaps one path that some publishers will take. I think that this is original content that is native to the digital format, and I think publishers thinking creatively should be able to find lots of ways to package that content.
It sounds like that for e-singles, the winners are, the readers who want to read short content, publishers who are able to squeeze a little bit more money out of the content that they already own, and authors who are finding a home for things that before, the e-singles programs that are around, they didn't have a home for those things by and large. It sounds like the only constituency that may not end up a winner are the standalone companies like Digitized that are trying to make a business out of it. Do you think that that's the case, Laura?
Well, I think it's a bit early to say whether this is the type of strategy that can actually sustain a company. Byliner has sold, says it's on track to sell between 750,000 and 1 million of its Byliner originals this year. The only number that the Atavist has been willing to release is that they've sold over 100,000 copies. Do I think that this is, a feasible business model for startups when the sales are still, this is still kind of an experimental format in some ways, and the price of the content is low? Honestly, I think it's too early to say, and I think that we're going to see the companies that are successful at it having another revenue stream within the company as well. For example, the Atavist licenses its platform to other publishers. I think it's its app-building platform or something like that it licenses. Byliner has this sort of journalism archive as well as the Byliner originals. I think something like that, may be necessary so that your sole source of revenue is not just coming from these.
Thanks. This next question is for Iris. What do you think the advantages are of having a Facebook page that you repurpose content on to try to build your author platform and to market a book versus having just a standalone website?
I mean, I think that a standalone website, the difference is the interactivity. It's also a question of trying to drive people to an exterior website where on Facebook you're making it very easy for them to both find and share the information. So I think that it's important to be within the Facebook world to prevent prevent people from having to come over to an external website. And also, too, you do want to have that level of interactivity, which I think that standard websites, for authors with small budgets or publishers with small budgets don't really have that functionality embedded in them. Facebook offers those tools primarily for free, which I think is an advantage of being there.
So what you're suggesting is that people that want to repurpose their content in the way that you talked about in your presentation think about where the audience is.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if your audience is on LinkedIn, then you should be on LinkedIn. And then when we're talking about repurposing the content in those kinds of social media portals, I'm thinking of much, much smaller bits and bytes that, using a longer blog post or something like that, I would say, you have to post in a platform that supports that longer format. And again, obviously, I know that, Laura was speaking to Kindle singles, and believe as a revenue model, that's an interesting thing. But obviously for marketing promotional purposes, like there is something there as well. So I would say, if you have a lot of content or something ended up on the cutting room floor that you can use in that kind of a way, then do that. If you have some, kind of expert that's too long, and you don't want to have an incredibly long Facebook post. So that would be the time to go to an external blog or some sort of thing like that.
So I'd love to go back to singles for a second, Stephen. And you heard what Laura had to say. You saw her presentation. Innodata is in the business partially of working with publishers on figuring out their overall content strategy. Is repurposing content for singles or using cutting room floor content as the basis for short forms something that Innodata might advise publishers to do? And how does this new emerging strategy fit into what your company is talking about?
I think one way of answering that, I think, is thinking about a totally flexible way of managing and delivering content. We still work with a lot of publishers where content is locked in to formats or into systems that make it relatively inaccessible without cost or without conversion. But we increasingly advise a lot of our customers on implementing XML-based systems or thinking about how to launch digital products successfully in a very flexible way, in ways that the content is structured. We have an approach we call content profiling to think about the way the content is structured optimally for all of the known and in some cases unknown ways that it might ultimately be distributed. And that is a large focus of what we do. So I think the key is to think about how you unlock content and make it very flexible for distribution in any new emerging format, whether it's single or whether it's a tablet-based product, or I showed a slide from Inkling, which is highly interactively marked up content as well. And I think that to me is the key. If you've got that flexibility at source, and the further up the editorial process you can implement that flexibility, the more likely it is to be successful. But if you're on the road to doing that, then I think the ability to quickly and in a very agile way adapt to opportunities like singles when they come along will be there. And that to me is the key.
So what about all the way downstream at the marketing point, what Iris is talking about? Are you taking into account when you're helping publishers develop their overall content strategy from the beginning, all the way downstream, how it will be used in social media to market?
Yes, we do. I mean, we look at all possible exposure points of content to see what we need to do when we think about how we profile it and manage it upstream. I think we've seen some examples about how very small chunks of content can travel out independently nowadays, independently of the product itself. And that kind of indicates, you've got to think about how you granularize and manage the content structure much further upstream. So the short answer is yes. We try and think about as many distribution points as we can and the form of content that travels in those distribution points and how we transform it in a very rapid and quick way.
Iris, have you ever seen a project where the social media marketing strategy using content was thought of at the very beginning of the process?
The process of the editorial process or the marketing process?
The editorial process.
Oh, gosh.
Do you think it would help?
I mean, I do think that it would help. I think especially those things that drop out of books on the way to publication, I think are so great to be able to use. And so again, that's a perfect example of not cannibalizing book sales at all because it's not the redundancy of content. And before, I worked in my digital media position here, I was a former editor, and there were things that got cut out all the time. So I think that it's important to have an eye to this during the editorial process. I wouldn't write to it because I think that that would be, detrimental to the end product. But certainly to keep it in mind and think about, what could we do here? And I think that it's that question of remixing and thinking about the different ways of combining information. So if some of those things are cut out or some of those things, just don't make it into the final book or are expressed in a different way, I would say, put those aside and use them for recycling.
Let's have Laura answer the final question. This is a fun topic. Comes from one of our attendees. What's your opinion on author royalty rates for things like singles? But I'm guessing the attendees would also like to hear your opinion on author royalty rates for all ebooks.
Well, first of all, I can speak to the royalty rates on the singles. If you do a single for Kindle Singles, you receive a 70% royalty, even if the book is priced under $2.99. So you get 70% of each sale. Amazon takes 30%. Byliner and the Atavist are paying a fee up front to writers, and then they are doing a 50-50 revenue share of each sale after that. As for royalty rates in general, I do believe that book publishers should be paying, traditional book publishers should be paying higher royalties on ebooks. I think that they should probably be paying a 50% royalty, keeping in mind, though, that the authors who work with traditional publishers do receive advances, which authors who self-publish through platforms like KDP do not. So advances, are a factor in digital royalty rates as well. But overall, I do believe that digital royalty rates should be 50% for full-length books.
Well, thanks. That's a great note to end on. This concludes today's webcast. As I said earlier, in the following days, all attendees will receive an email with a link to a recording of this webcast from GoToWebinar. I'd like to thank our panelists, Iris Blassie, Laura Hazard-Owen, and Stephen Ryden-Lloyd. And I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Innodata, and of course, all of our attendees for attending today. Thanks, and have a great day.